I also think recruiting excellence is having a true partnership between the recruiter and the hiring manager. One of the things that I do now with the positions I recruit for is I make sure that my hiring managers are placing hiring as a priority. And again, that goes back to the candidate experience.
Welcome to Offer Accepted, the podcast that elevates your recruiting game. Your host, Shannon Ogborn, interviews top talent acquisition leaders, uncovering their secrets to building and leading successful recruiting teams. Gain valuable insights and actionable advice from analyzing cutting-edge metrics to claiming your seat at the table. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Offer Accepted. I'm Shannon Ogborn, your host, and this episode is brought to you by Ashby, the all-in-one recruiting platform empowering ambitious teams from seed to IPO and beyond. I'm super excited because I'm here today with Melissa Grabiner, and she is joining us from Chicago, my hometown. Woo! And she has been in the HR and TA space for her entire career. She spent 18 years at Takeda Pharmaceuticals, where she was the global TA director for the company's largest division. She currently works at OneDigital, where she consults with various clients in the biotech and pharma space on all things TA. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Well, I know I just gave sort of like a brief background, but would love if you could just give us like a quick 30-second intro on sort of what your current work is.
Yeah, you bet. So I am a 100% remote employee. I've been at my current company, OneDigital, for this month. It's 3 years. And I work with various clients. Most of them are in the San Francisco area. A lot of them are venture-backed biotech pharmaceutical startups. And I've had some clients where they literally hired me to build out their entire talent acquisition infrastructure, processes, systems, technology, procedures. I've had other clients where they hire me to fill a certain number of positions, anywhere from entry level all the way to the very, very top C-suite. It's a great job. I have a lot of variety. Some clients are like a month, some are a year. And I've probably had, in the 3 years that I've been here, I would say 7 or 8 different clients. It's really nice working with different clients because you learn a lot about different organizations. You meet a lot of different people, and it's a super fun job. I'm very blessed.
Amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
And you've obviously had a long tenure in the recruiting space, which is so amazing. And I'm excited to hear your insights here. What really stands out to you, I guess, as an area for growth? Like, what should recruiting teams be focusing more on than they have historically?
Yeah, and this is something that I post about a lot on LinkedIn. I think a lot of companies are losing sight of the importance of the candidate experience. The job market is very challenging and difficult and competitive right now. And I have been in recruiting long enough to know that every couple of years, the pendulum changes. So right now it's in what I would call an employer-driven market, but sooner versus later, it's going to be more in a candidate-driven market. And I think what a lot of companies are doing is they have skeletal staff in regards to recruiters. And so recruiters have so much on their plates. And a lot of these companies are losing sight of the importance of the candidate experience. And I read a lot about candidate ghosting, companies putting candidates through incredibly long, difficult, recruiting processes, asking them to create presentations, take skill assessments. And I am very active on LinkedIn and read a lot of stories from people that are simply venting about, I put 3 months into, this process and I have been ghosted and I still don't know what's happening because no one's getting back to me. I think that candidates deserve better, and it's very stressful looking for a job. And when you put your heart and soul into a company, especially in a very vulnerable place, candidates deserve that feedback. And so what I really hope happens is companies take a long, hard look at their processes and even dissect them and say, in every part of the process, from the job description all the way to a candidate's first day, where are the pain points that are happening where candidates might be suffering? And I think that the companies that really care about this, when the pendulum does change back into more of a candidate-driven market, they're the ones that are going to win the war for talent.
But yeah, I couldn't agree more about candidate experience. It's definitely been a really tough time for candidates, but also recruiters. And so I'm curious to talk a little bit about some things that we had talked about previously. sort of your experience managing direct reports over 20 years. And you had mentioned this really amazing thing to me that you had never lost a direct report. I would love to hear a little bit from your perspective on why it's so important to be a good manager and leader. And I think especially speaking to these times where, like you said, talent teams are skeletal right now. They're lean and it's hard. People are burning out. So tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm the most proud of looking back throughout my career is I've managed up to 22 people at a time, which was, very challenging to say the least. But I've always been a people manager. I'd say for the last 20 years, I always had teams under me. And I'm super proud of the fact that I never lost an employee due to a resignation. And my golden rule is to treat others the way I would want to be treated. I've had some really wonderful managers in my career. I've had some pretty horrible managers as well. And I've been able to learn from both of them. And so with my team, they always knew where they stood. I provided ongoing feedback. I made sure that I had an open door policy where they could come to me at any time and talk about anything that was on their mind. Work-life balance was super important to me, and it was critical that my employees understood that I respected and valued that they had lives outside of work. Family first always. I never wanted them to be in a position where they had to miss their children's baseball game or any important moments in the lives of their children. I never wanted them to have to miss out on them because of the job. The other thing was I never forgot an anniversary. I never forgot a birthday. I knew the names of everyone's kids, those that had children, and I treated them like equals. My team knew, and I made sure that they really understood this, that maybe on an organizational chart, my name was on top and their names were below me. But at the end of the day, we were all equals, regardless of our level, our tenure, our position. And as a matter of fact, and I actually posted about this yesterday on LinkedIn, so much of what I have learned throughout the years have been through my direct reports. I've never tried or pretended to be the smartest person in the room. There were recruiters on my team that were smarter than me, that knew more than me, that I learned from every day. And that was such a blessing for me. And I wanted us to have fun at work. Work at many times was incredibly stressful, but you always have to have fun and realize that at the end of the day, we're not saving lives here. We're not curing cancer. Our job was to hire people. And we took our job seriously. But if you lose the sight of having fun, it makes going to work kind of a drag. And, the other thing I did was every quarter I would meet with every direct report and have like a mini performance review, because I'm a big believer in that when an employee has an annual review, there should never be any surprises. And if there were surprises, then I was failing as a manager. So I would sit down with all of my direct reports and say, what has gone well? What has not gone well? How can I better support you? What were some of your key learnings? Are you looking to grow and develop? And if so, what areas are those in? And I always had their backs. At the end of the day, I supported them. We were all human. We all made mistakes. And I realized that mistakes were okay as long as you learn from them and try not to make the same mistake again. But again, if you treat people the way you want to be treated, you can never go wrong. And that was the main principle that I always stood by.
100%. I love what you said about, always remembering anniversaries, birthdays, and those things, because those are important to people. And as much as I think I've seen some people and companies really want to separate, your personal life from work, when you walk in the door, you're that person. You have these things that are going on externally that matter to you, and you can't just, it's not like the show Severance. I don't know if you've seen that show.
I have, yeah.
But you can't just walk into work and forget everything that is happening outside. That's just not reality. So I love that you really take the time to know your people, with, of course, without overstepping boundaries, but know what's important to them so that you can show that it's important to them, because that's just, I feel like, really motivating as a direct report to feel like your leader really gets you.
Right. And the other thing that I did was mental health in the workplace is super important to me. And there were times that we had a lot of work on our plates and things were very stressful. And I always encouraged my team to take mental health days as they saw fit. I was never a big believer in, okay, you have 15 days left of vacation. And once you hit you've taken them all, you can't take any more. I was very laid back about the time off that my team took. And I always encourage them, first of all, to use all of their PTO. But if they ever needed a mental health day, or if I saw that they were stressed or they were working crazy hours, I would proactively go to them and say, I want you to take this day off. It's not going to count against your PTO bank, but you need time to relax, rejuvenate, and recharge. And I think that was very appreciated from my team because they understood that I cared about the fact that they had lives outside of work. Because at the end of the day, if we're struggling in our personal lives, that does bleed into our professional life. And I wanted my team to always feel valued and supported, just like I would want my manager to treat me in the same way.
100%. On this note of sort of PTO, I kind of want to dig deeper into this because, and I was just talking to someone about this recently, taking PTO as recruiters, and I've heard this also about sales, is, there's a lot of anxiety about taking PTO because it's like, what's going to happen to my candidates? What is going to happen? Like, who's going to get the credit if someone else if they push through the hire while I'm out? I would love if you could sort of walk us through tactically how you really encourage people to take PTO, and have you implemented any systems to sort of help alleviate some of this anxiety for people to take PTO?
So it was understood within my team that, number one, I absolutely encourage time off. And again, if I saw a team member struggling or working crazy hours, I would go to them proactively and really encourage them to take time away from the office. And what I created was a backup plan system within my team. So I had two groups. I had coordinators and I had recruiters. And so when I knew someone was going to be taking time off, what I would do is I would go to, and let's say it was a recruiter, I would go to another recruiter and say, tell me about your workload. Tell me what's on your plate. Are you able to assume the work of XYZ employee while they're out of the office? Depending on the time of the year and what was happening within the business, sometimes I would have one person be the backup. Sometimes I would divvy the work amongst a variety of recruiters. So for example, if Amanda, for example, went on a 2-week vacation, I'm not going to give one of my direct reports the workload of another recruiter for 2 weeks. I would divvy that up. And so what was beautiful about the system was that no one ever complained or rolled their eyes when they were helping a team member, because they knew that when they were going to be out of the office, that team member would be helping them. And the other thing was I helped too. It wasn't just here, recruiters, let's divvy up the work. It was, okay, I'm the manager of this team and I'm going to help with that. And so there were many times where my direct reports would be out of the office and I would completely take over their workload. It was not always easy, but I wanted my team to know that they could take time off and not come back to a complete firestorm. I didn't want anything to slip through the cracks with their candidates or with their hiring managers. And so it was somewhat of like it was a very lax, loose sort of backup system, but it worked because everybody supported each other. And again, they knew that if they backed up XYZ employee, when they took time off, that employee would back up them. And I think that's really important because I have been in jobs where I would take time off and I would come back to such a firestorm that it literally would take me a week to catch up. And then all of the work was just getting pushed to the side, just playing catch up. So it's really important, I think, for all employees, no matter what their job is, that they are able to take time off without guilt, without feeling overwhelmed. And I think it's up to the manager of the team to make sure that doesn't happen. Leadership to me at any company, it all starts at the top and trickles its way down. And I knew as the leader of this team, I had to do what I could do to make my employees feel valued and to feel like they had lives outside of work. And it wasn't just lip service, that I really meant it. So that's why, again, was totally fine if people took time off after they've, taken all the time off that was given to them, or I would go to them and say, I really think you need to take a mental health day. But it's important that managers keep sight of how their employees are feeling, how their employees are doing, and making sure that their workloads are manageable while you supported time away from the office.
100%. I mean, I think it's so amazing that you also were willing to take responsibility of candidates as a manager. I also think it's really important for managers, recruiting managers, to work with candidates through a cycle so they can see what the process is and see, like, make sure everything is still running smoothly. So, yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important because coming back from being out of office, and if you don't trust the person who is covering for you, or you don't have faith in this backup system, it's really hard to enjoy time off when you just feel like you're coming back to a potentially a complete disaster, and that's no fun.
And it's not fair to the employee. I mean, my team works so very hard throughout the year. They work so incredibly hard. They deserve that time off. It's really important that my team would come back feeling rejuvenated with the spring in their step and ready to tackle the day, right? Ready to tackle the week, ready to tackle all the work that's in front of them. And I think part of the reason why, I've never lost a direct report in as many years as I've been managing is because I treated my team like they were human beings and not just an employee, because we are all human beings. And that means that life shouldn't always be about work. Life is about your family. It's about what you are able to do to make your heart and soul happy. That's what life is really about.
100%. I've heard people say before about managers, they're like, don't pick a job for a manager because your manager can change. But at the same time, it's no wonder that people do, or people stay because of a manager, or people leave because of a manager, because that human being has so much impact on your health and well-being, and your mental well-being, and your workload, and how much you enjoy work. So yes, like, I understand where people are coming from. We're like, you shouldn't pick a place to work because of the manager, or pick a job because of the manager. But I'm like, I feel like I always do, because that's so important to me, to have someone who I feel like is going to be really supportive, throughout your journey at the company or in the role.
I would much rather work at a job earning less salary and having a great manager than working in a position where I earned a higher income and didn't like my boss. I have been in situations where I've worked for incredible leaders, and conversely, I've worked for some pretty crappy leaders. And never again will I personally put myself in a position to work for someone that was, in my opinion, not a good manager. I have been blessed beyond blessed to have, there's two managers that come to my mind that were so phenomenal and so fantastic. That is what I aspire to be in terms of being a manager of my own team. One of my managers, she was so incredible. Every time we had a conversation, before even starting to talk about work, she would say to me, how's Ryan? How's Charlie? My son's names. How's Craig, my husband? Tell me what's going on in your world. Every single time we spoke, that's what we spoke about first. It was not about work. It was about my family and my personal life. And I can't tell you how much I appreciated that, because I felt like she really cared about me as a human being, not just one of her employees. And so that's exactly how I had my own practice when I was working with my direct reports, is, again, never forgetting a birthday, an anniversary, knowing all their kids' names. That's what I cared about the most, because at the end of the day, we're all replaceable at work. I don't care how long you've been at the company. I don't care how much of a producer you are. I don't care what your level or title is. We are all replaceable, right? And I see it happen all the time. But as I say, I'm not replaceable to my children. I'm not replaceable to my parents or my spouse. I am replaceable at a job. And truth be told, if someone leaves a company, within a week, their job's going to be posted anyways. So everyone is replaceable, everyone.
But it is true. You are replaceable as an employee, but you're not replaceable as a human being to the people in your life, your friends, your family, your chosen family, and all of that. But one of the things on the note of sort of this backup system, and I know that for me personally as a recruiter, I would get a lot of anxiety about this, like, who gets credit if a candidate gets closed while the primary recruiter is out. And this is a really big talking point amongst a lot of individual contributors, because our goals as individual contributors are almost always based off of how many people you hire. So can you tell me a little bit about how you thought about this as a leader and how you sort of assured people that this wasn't like an anxiety point and like what you did to do that?
Yeah, when I was rating my team and I was looking at their performance, it was never really important to me how many hires one of my recruiters had. What was important to me was the hiring manager experience and the candidate experience. And those were those were the two things that I focused on the most. As part of the performance review of each of my employees, I would reach out to a handful of their hiring managers to see how they felt about their recruiter. And we also did the same thing with our candidates. We would ask our candidates to rate their experience with the hiring process and with their recruiter. That was more important to me than the numbers. The other thing too is the way my team was structured is we each covered a specific portion of the country. And so it was never an apples to apples comparison because the Northeast might have been much slower for hiring than maybe the Southwest. And so that was always out of my recruiter's control in terms of how many employees they actually hired, because a lot of it was based on what were the openings at the time for the locations that they supported. So again, I was never a big stickler on the number of hires because there's so many external variables that are out of the control of the recruiter. The other thing about my team's jobs as recruiters, which is different than some other recruiters, is that a lot of recruiters that work in like the contingency or retained search firm business, they are paid by how many hires someone has. My team was receiving a salary. So regardless of the hires, they were going to receive the same income every 2 weeks on their paycheck. So again, it was never important to me about the number of hires. It was how were the candidates treated? How were the hiring managers treated? And were my recruiters a true partner in the hiring process with the people that they supported?
Yeah. That makes total sense. It's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, every company takes recruiters' goals a little bit differently, but I think if you're a leader and you create this mindset of, like you were saying earlier, like you help me, I help you, and it all sort of comes out in the wash sort of situation. And I know that you have mentioned to me previously just like really communicating clearly when someone's going on PTO, like what the situation is. I think that is just really enabling to success and people feeling comfortable with the system that you have. Amazing. Well, any sort of last notes on this, like sort of principles you've learned as a manager, PTO backup system that you wanted to mention?
No, I would just say for anyone who is starting their career as a people manager or kind of moving into that role, I think it's really important, and this is what I always had in the back of my mind, is that if you treat people the way you would want to be treated, you can never go wrong. Like I said earlier, on an org chart, my boss was above me and I was above my team. But at the end of the day, we were all equals. My team won a huge amount of awards throughout the years, I'll be honest, and it was such a high point of my career. And I never had an easy time taking the credit for it. And so I remember there was one time I was on a global TA call with Takeda, and there were, the entire global TA organization was on this call. We had them quarterly, and there were well over 100 people on the call. And my team won an award for, I don't remember what it was, but we won an award. And I, as the manager, was asked to speak about it. And so the first thing I said was, I want to start off by saying that this award should be given to every single person on my team. It should not be given to me because they make my jobs easy. I had such a great team of rock stars who were so committed that they made me look good. And then I gave them 100% of the credit. And I know that it really meant a lot to my team, but it wasn't just lip service. I truly believe that if I didn't have the team that I had, my success would never have happened. And I attribute all my success to them. And it's interesting because, I left that company about 4 years ago when my position was relocated to Boston. And I still speak to every one of my direct reports to this day. We've all gone on to different things. My team was dispersed throughout the United States. And so even the folks that don't live in Chicago, we text, we talk. I still have a great relationship with them because I care about them as individuals. And just because we all lost our jobs, it does not mean that I didn't want to continue the great relationship that I had with each and every one of them. I still provide references for them. I support them in anything that they need. And I know that they would always do the same for me.
100%. And to your point about, treat people like you want to be treated as a manager, it's like, would you want to work for you?
Exactly.
And if the answer is, ooh, I don't know, then obviously some people need to reconsider. I think we've all had, incredible managers, and some of us have had not so great managers. And so it's really important to use that empathy. And I love that you do that. But I would love to take sort of like a big step back. There's a couple of things that we really like to hear from all of our guests about. One of which is about hiring excellence. At Ashby, we talk a lot about hiring excellence, and I love hearing from our guests. When you hear hiring excellence, what does that mean to you?
So the first thing it means to me, and I know I talked about this a little bit earlier, is the candidate experience. I think every single recruiting division has to have the candidate experience front and center in every single part of the process. Structured interviews is very important as well. I am not a big believer in putting candidates through the ringer. I think that if you know exactly what you're looking for, you can hire people within 2 to 3 interviews. I'm a big believer in that. I hear about a lot of these companies that are putting candidates through 15 plus interviews, which is so ridiculous. It's not fair to the candidates. It's not fair to the individuals that are part of that interview process. So structured interviews that happen quickly are super, super important. And I also think recruiting excellence is having a true partnership between the recruiter and the hiring manager. One of the things that I do now with the positions I recruit for is I make sure that my hiring managers are placing hiring as a priority. And again, that goes back to the candidate experience. So if I'm phone screening a candidate and my hiring manager sits on my feedback for 2 weeks, well, they're not being a true partner to me, and maybe we put the position on hold. So there has to be a sense of urgency with hiring managers, and they have to be true collaborative and strategic partners with the recruiter, because again, that allows companies to hire quickly, but it also bodes very well on the candidate experience. And I think cultural fit is really important. I know Zappos is a company that really excels in this area. Hiring people for a cultural fit is really important. They have to have the alignment with the company values and with the company mission. And if you hire people that aren't a cultural fit, it's going to turn out that at some point, the individual is going to end up leaving the company. So it's important that companies talk about cultural fit, ask the right interview questions to make sure that somebody is a cultural fit. And then I think, hiring excellence to me is also about diversity. We hear a lot about diversity and inclusion, but it's super important. So I think a diversity of individuals is what hiring excellence is all about. We don't want to hire people that are the same as us. When you hire people, you get different schools of thought, and that's how a business can grow and can flourish. So those are some of the things that I would think about in terms of hiring excellence. It's not just about finding the most qualified candidates. It's creating a structured and fair and balanced and engaging interview process that helps to align with the organization's values and culture. And I also think one last comment is leveraging the right technology. So there are so many companies right now that are, into the kind of the TA space in terms of different applicant tracking systems and different AI tools, but having the right technology to support the business. My team, we did a lot of high volume recruiting. We hired about 3,000 employees a year. We had the right technology and the systems and the process in place to support a high volume organization. So companies that have that recruiting excellent mindset have to work with partners that are able to help with the candidate experience and drive efficiency and effectiveness towards their processes.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the interesting thing with cultural alignment and diversity is companies really have to be thoughtful in the interview process, like you're saying, structured interview, to make sure that their culture fit or culture ad is really about the values and not about homogeny or you're like me, so you're a match. So yeah, all of these things, just everything with TA just really intertwines so much together that you can't work on everything at one time, but one factor in recruiting could significantly impact the other. So it's a lot to take on, but love hearing what hiring excellence means to you. My last question, my favorite question, and you post a lot on LinkedIn, so you probably have some good takes here. I would love to know, what is your recruiting hot take?
And I know I've talked about it throughout this conversation. It's the candidate experience. I can't emphasize enough the importance of it. I see a lot of posts from people that are blasting companies that have treated them poorly during the hiring process. This is scathing to an employer brand. And what's going to happen is the pendulum is going to change. It's once again going to be an employee candidate-driven market, and candidates are going to remember how they were treated by those companies. And so if you treat a candidate like crap, it's going to come back to bite you. There's tools like Glassdoor and other websites where people are going on. I've seen TikTok videos of people blasting companies. That's not good, right? And if companies care about their employer brand, they need to get the candidate experience right. I cannot stress this enough.
100%. And companies need to care about it because they care about it too, not just because it impacts their employer brand.
Exactly.
But if a company genuinely puts a lot of care and effort into it, you're creating a liability if you don't, but then you're also this is a human to human function.
Right.
We are humans interacting with humans to get them jobs that will hopefully be a good match for them. And at the end of the day, it's just important that we humanize this process and treat people, like you said about being a manager, the way that you want to be treated.
Yep. It's so important. And I think a lot of companies just don't think about it or don't care or kind of lose sight of it. But I've been recruiting long enough to know, again, that this time is not going to last forever. And in due time, and I hope it's sooner rather versus later, companies are not going to be able to fill their jobs quickly enough because candidates are going to have so many more options than they have now. I'll tell you this really quick story. About 2 years ago, I was contacted by a company for a vice president of TA position. And as part of the interview process, I was required to complete a very detailed presentation, which was basically mapping out what their entire function would look like. This included what technology would I use? What would my budget be? What would my headcount be? What processes, systems, and procedures would I implement? This would have taken me a really long time to do. So I said to the company, I said, are you going to pay me for my time? Are you going to pay me for my work? The company said no. So I said, no. I removed myself from the process. Companies cannot get free work out of people and take advantage of the current job market. I very highly, and I post about this too on LinkedIn, if a company is taking advantage of you and is asking you to do something that you think they're going to benefit from, walk away. I've seen people post, especially marketing people, where they applied for a marketing job, they went through the interview process, they created an entire marketing strategy. And then what happens? The company places that exact document on their website and uses it as their own. I know people that have sent cease and desist letters and have gotten attorneys involved. Companies need to be very careful.
100%. Agree.
Mm-hmm.
Agree.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are coming up on our time. Where should people go to learn more about you and your work?
Yes, thank you for asking. LinkedIn. I post a lot about mental health, a lot about, I'm very pro job seeker. Anyone can follow me on LinkedIn. I have a pretty big following. I have about 335,000 followers. I'm a top voice as well, job search strategy top voice. I call things out as I see them. I don't sugarcoat, and I will always be an advocate for job seekers.
Amazing. Well, Melissa, can't thank you enough for being with us on Offer Accepted. I really appreciated you spending the time with us. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Offer Accepted, the podcast for ambitious recruiting professionals, brought to you by Ashby, the all-in-one recruiting platform. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and share with your TA community. We'll see you next time.